Do you think you're free just because you choose your job, buy what you want, and browse the internet whenever you feel like it? What if I told you that, without realizing it, you're part of a system that resembles medieval feudalism more than modern capitalism? Today we're going to talk about a disturbing but increasingly hard to ignore idea, technofeudalism. Inspired by Yanis Varoufakis's analysis, this video explores an uncomfortable truth. We may not be free citizens, but digital serfs serving platforms that govern our lives without us noticing. Stay tuned, because what you're about to discover might change how you see your daily life. Before our capitalist system, there was a time of feudal lords and serfs. A small elite, the feudal lords, controlled the land, wealth, and power, while the majority, the serfs, lived in deep dependence, working the lord's land. Their lives were determined by the whims of those who ruled them. Their purpose was servitude, and if they fell out of favor with the elite, it could mean the end of their lives. But times changed, and humanity moved toward a different system that offered more opportunities and mobility for most people. Looking at persistent exploitation and great inequality, we notice that capitalism isn't free of flaws. Most people survive by trading their time and labor for wages, while capitalists profit from their work. Still, compared to feudalism, capitalism provides more personal freedom. To a point, we can shape our lives instead of being condemned to servitude. However, according to some, the capitalism we know has been slowly dying. Instead of moving toward a better system, as the serfs did before us, we've fallen into something worse. Much worse, at least according to Yanis Varoufakis, who lays out his analysis in his book, Technofeudalism: What Killed Capitalism. So, what is technofeudalism? How does it affect us? And why is it important to talk about? Don't worry, I'll keep the economic talk as short and straightforward as possible. For a more detailed overview of the economics and history of technofeudalism, I recommend reading Varoufakis's book. I'm more interested in what technofeudalism, if it's truly taking shape, means for regular people like you and me. How does it affect things like freedom, self-sufficiency, or mental health? What about our working conditions, privacy, and the gap between rich and poor? And how do we deal with all this? Making this video brought mixed feelings. Not because I didn't like the topic, it's fascinating, but because it's also quite unsettling. I'll reflect on this at the end. Let's explore technofeudalism and what it means for our lives and overall well-being. If you want to support this channel, join my Patreon page, become a YouTube member, or check out my books and merchandise. My novel, The Impulse Fall of a Stoic, has been well received so far, so I hope you'll give it a try. Thanks. Back to the feudal era. In feudal times, if you wanted to make a living, you had to produce your own means of survival, mainly food. But to grow food, you needed land, and land wasn't something you could just buy. It wasn't a commodity in the modern sense. Instead, it was controlled by the nobility and passed down through inheritance, conquest, or royal decree. This rigid system meant that those who didn't own land, the peasants, had no choice but to work as serfs on the lands of feudal lords. I quote, "During the feudal era, which took hold properly across Europe in the 11th century, economic life did not involve economic choices. If you were born into the landowning nobility, you would never think of selling your ancestors' land. And if you were born a serf, you were forced to work the land on behalf of the landowner, free of any illusion that you might one day own land yourself." End quote. The feudal lords didn't work. The serfs did all the labor, keeping part of their production while giving the rest to the lord or his vassals. This tribute typically included grain, meat, vegetables, and other goods produced on the land. So serfs were tied to the land, as they depended entirely on the feudal lord economically. Now, it's not far-fetched to compare today's economic circumstances to the feudal era. Just look around. We own houses, run businesses, and earn wages for our work. Your boss might be a jerk, but they're not a feudal lord squeezing you for grain while you work land you'll never own. And yet, beneath the surface, a shift has taken place: cloud rent. Today, many people already work in conditions that don't involve a boss or manager, but something else: a system or platform that gives them access to work on its terms and rules. This includes giving a percentage of your earnings to these platforms. Often, these platforms let you decide when and how many hours you work, and the annoying middle manager breathing down your neck all day isn't part of the equation. Take YouTube, for example. When you're in the partner program, you earn money from ads. As of today, 55% of your channel's revenue goes to you as the creator, and 45% goes to YouTube. As long as you stay within the guidelines, you have creative freedom and could even make YouTube a full-time job if you consistently get lots of views. This sounds pretty good, right? For many, including me, it's a great opportunity to monetize creativity. I owe a lot to this platform, so I'm grateful. This channel wouldn't exist without it. But setting the good stuff aside, Varoufakis would say that this deal I have with YouTube is in fact an example of techno-feudalism, which makes me, well, a serf. You see, YouTube itself doesn't create content, except for some instructional and informational videos about the platform. The vast majority of content is created by its users. So YouTube's main product isn't made by YouTube itself, unlike, say, Ford, which manufactures its own products, cars. YouTube depends entirely on user-generated content. Thus, YouTube provides the platform, while creators do the work and share a portion of their revenue with YouTube, what Yanis Varoufakis calls cloud rent. In other words, creators rent digital space on YouTube, paying for it with a cut of their earnings. Then Varoufakis points out that this cut isn't essentially different from the portion of production that serfs pay to their lords. But there's more. Let's look at another super platform owned by a guy who loves yachts so much he bought one for $500 million. Long live capitalism, right? Varoufakis would correct me and say, no, it's techno-feudalism we're seeing here. From the techno-feudalist perspective, Jeff Bezos is the quintessential techno-feudal lord, which I'll illustrate now. From the early days of the internet to online enclosures, Amazon is a giant online store with millions of sellers, offering every product available in retail. However, Amazon doesn't produce much itself. Like YouTube, it provides a platform but mediates between buyers and sellers. These buyers and sellers pay fees to Amazon in various ways in exchange for using the platform. Amazon overwhelmingly dominates the e-commerce landscape. Consider its Kindle ebook service, for example. Currently, Kindle ebooks account for 83% of sales in the United States and 68% worldwide. For many independent publishers, book sales heavily depend on Amazon. I'm no different. My books are sold there too, which makes me heavily reliant on the platform. Again, I'm grateful for the opportunity, but there's also a downside to letting my livelihood depend on this tech giant. If Amazon suspended my account or stopped showing my books in listings, my ability to sell books would shrink dramatically. Plus, I have no say in what happens on the platform. There's no democracy within big tech. They make the rules, set the policies, and design the algorithms that decide which products and content get seen and which get buried. My bookstore isn't mine. It's just a space I rent from Jeff, who can take it back whenever he wants. Facebook recently deleted my page without giving a reason. I had no say in this since I didn't own the page. But you might think, how do you compare these platforms, these companies like Amazon, YouTube, or Facebook, to the estates of medieval feudal lords? Isn't it a completely different game? According to Varoufakis, the essence is the same. Techno-feudalism isn't about land, it's about cloud space. And the feudalists in a techno-feudal society are, therefore, not landowners, but cloud lords. Still, aren't land and cloud space completely different things? Varoufakis compares the early days of the internet to medieval commons, lands that nobody really owned, where peasants could freely grow food. Over time, landowners enclosed these commons for private use, known as the enclosures, leaving peasants dependent on landowners to access land and make a living. Now, just as those landowners enclosed the commons, big tech enclosed the internet. Just as the early internet consisted of countless independent spaces, like your aunt's recipe website or the old Final Fantasy online forums where I used to hang out as a teenager, big tech turned it into giant enclosures owned by powerful platforms, home to millions of techno-feudal serfs, supported by low-wage workers whom Varoufakis calls cloud proles. According to Varoufakis, the shift from capitalism to techno-feudalism has many consequences, not just for how we work or do business, but also for our lives in general. Let's say we accept this whole concept of techno-feudalism. What are the effects of this system? How are our lives within a techno-feudal society? Let's start with the people who make a living through today's online platforms. Digital serfs. An existential issue. Imagine you're a driver. You've driven for years for various taxi companies and as a private driver, and you're pretty good at it. Now imagine that at some point, the only way to make a living using your skills is through specific online platforms. Plus, using these platforms means giving them a share of your earnings. Essentially, you're paying rent to work. The platform owners don't drive themselves. They sit back and watch as those forced to use their platform generate income for them, making them incredibly rich. For many drivers, what I just described is a reality as they're working for such platforms, and often their livelihoods depend on it. A well-known example is Uber, where people use their private cars to transport people. Both the driver and the customer use the same platform, which acts as a mediator and takes a share of the driver's earnings. The key difference between working for a traditional taxi company and working for Uber is that with Uber, you're not managed by a boss but by an algorithm. The same goes for YouTube creators and Amazon sellers. Sure, the algorithm doesn't nag or complain like some bosses and managers, but dealing with such an impersonal force operating on behalf of the techno-feudal lord has drawbacks. Consider the stories of those who drive for Uber and similar apps. Asmani. The Guardian reported an anonymous driver calls working for the algorithm an absolute nightmare. Your pay fluctuates constantly, as does the availability of work. Even when demand is high, the system sometimes claims there's no work, and since everything is automated, there's no one to ask why. Working as a serf for platforms like Uber doesn't make you an employee. You're just a user renting space on their cloud capital to make money. If they want you gone, they don't need to follow labor laws. They can simply suspend your account. Usually when you're fired as an employee, you just find another job. But if your livelihood is driving to transport people or deliver food and you're banned from one of these platforms, your ability to earn income from your work shrinks significantly. For example, platforms like Grab and Gojek have monopolized the motorcycle taxi business in several Southeast Asian countries. Those banned from these platforms have practically no options, or as Gen Z would say, they're screwed. But you might think there must be a good reason to ban someone from these platforms if the consequences are so drastic. Not really. Many drivers have been banned without explanation or for trivial reasons, like a slightly longer wait time. And again, there's no one to talk to. Regaining access to the platform is sometimes possible, but from what I've heard, the process is nothing short of Kafkaesque. I experienced the same when Facebook banned my page. There was no one to talk to and no clear way to appeal. As platforms expand, we may soon have no choice but to work for them. Many stores already heavily rely on platforms like Amazon, eBay, or Temu, turning them into serfs rather than independent sellers. Without these platforms, they're practically invisible to customers who prefer shopping there due to their logistical reliability and other advantages. Now imagine if every industry is absorbed by digital enclosures. What happens to our autonomy? From an existentialist perspective, if our survival depends entirely on obeying algorithms all day, are we still individual subjects with agency or merely objects being used? If platforms set the terms of our lives, can we truly consider ourselves free and thus free to shape meaningful lives and live authentically? Or are we trapped in an essence, like the serfs of the past, which is servitude? And if our default mode of existence involves being a pawn controlled by an algorithm, what does that say about human dignity? Now that we've explored the techno-feudal serf, let's move to the consumer. After all, serfs may have it tough, but at least customers benefit, right? Just consider the convenience, security, and reliability these platforms offer. It's a blessing compared to how things used to be. But is there a catch? Varoufakis's work reveals a big ugly monster lurking in the shadows, preying on those who use these services: autonomy. Our choices are ours. If there's one thing advertisers are masters at, it's creating desire. I mean, people don't just think of buying 2 big buckets of Quick and Bright on their own. It's because they saw ads on TV that planted this idea, this desire to have the product in their minds. A good ad pushes people's buttons, and if you want to advertise effectively, you ensure your message reaches the right audience. For example, trying to sell soy milk to someone on a carnivore diet probably isn't a good idea. Trying to sell a Tesla to a Buddhist monk won't be very effective either. So how does advertising work in a techno-feudal system? Meet Amazon Alexa, a cute device with an irresistible voice that claims to exist purely to improve your life. Plus, Alexa invites you to train it. After all, the more it knows about your desires and preferences, the better it can serve you. But behind Alexa's helpful facade lies a different reality. Apparently, Alexa keeps voice recordings and user interactions. There have been cases where it recorded private conversations without the user's knowledge. It uses the information it collects about you for targeted ads and who knows what other purposes. Amazon Alexa is just one example of how platforms collect user information. Facebook, Instagram, and Google do the same. Google might know more about you than your spouse, especially about what you're doing when they're not around. We're essentially trading our privacy for access to their services, like building our social media presence on Instagram or asking Google Assistant to open our curtains in the morning. Have you ever wondered why most social media platforms are free to use? Is it just Zuckerberg, the benign philanthropist, wanting to share his technology freely to improve our lives? Of course not. The fact that people put their entire lives on Facebook makes it a goldmine of information about our likes, preferences, activities, etc. It's the perfect marketing tool. We can use Facebook for free because we are the product. Plus, we do free labor for the platforms. By shaping our social media profiles, we're helping them grow, and we're doing it for free. Varoufakis claims, the true revolution that cloud capital has inflicted on humanity is the conversion of billions of us into willing cloud serfs, working for free to reproduce cloud capital for the benefit of its owners. End quote. According to Varoufakis, the personalized targeted advertising flooding our devices daily heavily influences our choices. Advertisers don't just show us products. They manufacture our desires, carefully aligning ads with our identities, latest interests, and vulnerabilities. This isn't just advertising. It's advertising on steroids. Moreover, these techno-feudal structures influence more than what we buy. They also control the information we receive and thus how we think and act. Because these platforms know us so well, their algorithms know what content will likely engage us and keep us on the platform. It seems like a good idea to only see things that interest us, but it also leads to a very distorted view of reality. For example, if you have particular political views, you'll not only see content related to those views, but also what generally makes your blood boil. Anger bait gets clicks, and algorithms know this well. If you hate, say, people defecating on the streets, you can be sure the algorithm will flood you with content about those people, eventually leading you to believe someone's defecating in every alley and corner. Besides a distorted reality, this hyper-selective information consumption can also lead to echo chambers, which often breed radicalization and, in some cases, violence. Controlling information means influencing people's thoughts, which determines people's actions. If you want to influence elections, for example, controlling information is key, something the Nazis knew very well back then. The danger of techno-feudalism is that the small elite ruling cloud capital controls the information supply in ways Joseph Goebbels could only dream of. It's no coincidence that Musk bought Twitter. He recognizes the immense influence that comes with controlling this piece of cloud capital. So now that we understand how much big tech influences our behavior and thinking, we might ask, to what extent are our choices truly ours? Dealing with techno-feudalism. There's more to techno-feudalism than the basics I covered in this video, like its global impact and how it's leading us to a new Cold War. I also didn't dive into capitalism, which from Varoufakis' perspective, gave birth to techno-feudalism. You'll find these things and more in the book Technofeudalism: What Killed Capitalism. As mentioned in the introduction, I made this video with mixed feelings. Considering current global affairs, this video feels like tossing another piece of pessimism and sadness onto the pile of garbage. So I wonder if it benefits my audience. At the same time, I think it's an important topic since it concerns almost everyone. So I want to end this essay by considering how to deal with these changing circumstances. In his book, Varoufakis proposes overthrowing the feudal lords and creating a democratized system where we collectively own and govern cloud spaces. While I'm all for that, there's no guarantee it will happen. Plus, with prominent cloud lords having political influence at the highest levels, including Donald Trump, their path to further reinforcing technofeudalism is wide open. So what can we do? Epictetus emphasized that we always have a choice, which is the only thing we truly own and thus something we must cherish and protect. This means they can influence our choices, but we can stay out of their reach as much as possible. They can offer tempting products and services, but we can refuse. They can exploit our data, but we can protect our privacy. They may own our means of making a living, but we can rely on them only as much as necessary. Cultivating qualities like minimalism, frugality, and mindfulness can help avoid getting too entangled in a structure that essentially depends on our participation. The less we need them, the less they own us. If techno-feudalism continues to develop, having some independence gained through these qualities is better than nothing. It's worth fighting for. We live connected, informed, productive, but also watched, manipulated, and increasingly dependent. Techno-feudalism isn't a future dystopia. It's a silent reality already forming around us. We may not wear shackles, but many of us already work, consume, and interact within platforms that dictate the rules without us having a say. We might not be able to change the system overnight, but recognizing how it works is the first step to resisting it. As Epictetus said, there are things we can't control, but we can always decide how to respond. So are you going to keep navigating the digital world as an obedient serf? Or are you going to start reclaiming your freedom, one conscious decision at a time? Thanks for watching this video. If it made you think, consider showing your support with a like, a comment, or sharing it with someone else. Until next time.